adventurers! Today we're going to be doing our long-awaited review for Mockingjay. It's been one that took us a while for us both to get through the book just based on our reading schedules, but it's here for you now. Mockingjay is written by Suzanne Collins. It's the third book in the Hunger Games trilogy, and it's a dystopian sci-fi.
We are going to, as always, start off with characters. Again, we'll be following our outline for the 5 story elements that we've talked about in a bunch of videos now.
One thing that's a little bit different about this review than in past reviews is our thoughts are really well aligned on this book, and so they're pretty well combined, and I know that's a little bit different than you normally see. So
as such, we will not have the we'll not have it broken down into my thoughts and Kate's thoughts like we normally would. It would kind of just be one person talks about the thoughts for the entire section. So, of course, Katniss being the first character, that's who we'll start off with, or the main character. In this one, Katniss is very much driven by revenge and selfishness, but not in a bad way. I mean, obviously there's not really a good way to be driven by revenge and selfishness, but she does it through a place of, if it can be said in this way, she does it through a place of love for her family and for her friends. Do you have anything to add?
yeah, actually I do. So forget everything we said because I'm saying stuff too. I actually was really upset with Katniss at the beginning of this book because she was being far more selfish towards the outside world than we'd ever seen her before, and that makes me angry when she's being selfish for no apparent reason, and when it's actually being detrimental, it's going to be detrimental to her future and her family's future. So Peeta struggles, to put it simply without jumping into spoilers too much, Peeta struggles like we've never seen him struggle before. He's always been the rock, he's always been the solid one who, even though he's got his own pain, he's there for Katniss. And this is a different side of him that we see where he's not sure of himself anymore.
Yeah, it adds for an interesting dynamic between the two characters, especially after you see what he's gone through.
Spoilers?
Yeah, what he's gone through, basically. Next character is Gale. We refrained from talking about him in book 1 and book 2 reviews because we felt like he shines most in this book. He really becomes one of the more central characters in this book. Because of that, we kind of are no longer looking at who he was in book 1 and book 2, and are now kind of focusing on where he is today, or in book 3. From book 1 and book 2, his driving force is justice without compassion. After, and this happens at the beginning of the book, there is a spoiler for book 1 and book 2 right here. So if you haven't read book 1 and book 2, why are you watching this review, I guess?
They just want to know our end thoughts.
That's
anyhow, so just a small disclaimer, this happens within the first 1 or 2 chapters of this book. So technically it's spoilers for for book 3, but since you're gonna find it out, it's not.
So after District 12 is destroyed, Gale's driving force is no longer justice. It's now gone more onto the revenge side. That was hard to get out. He becomes a much more morally gray and dark character, but he still remains a good guy, which is kind of weird to think about how a morally gray character can be a good guy, but it has happened before.
I think it's just his stance. Yes, it's morally gray, but overall his stance leans more towards the light. He also is super, super selfless.
Yes,
which is true. Part of what makes him such a redeemable character in some ways.
I think if you can sum up his character in 2 words, it would be selfless and dedicated.
So Snow is a little bit different in this book. He's not unexpected in his character revealing, I guess you could say, in what we see of his character in this time. This time he's openly controlling everyone, and everyone knows this, I feel like. Especially in District 13, this side of it. He can't hide behind the Hunger Games now. He's on the front lines because he's part of the games now. He's in the games now.
Coin, who is the other president of District 13 rather than Panem, is kind of the opposite but also very similar to Snow. She's really too secretive to be a good leader. She has her own agenda that she is clearly working towards, and while she's working towards it, she's also forcing everyone else around her and in District 13 to work towards it as well.
So moving on to plot. The plot was a little shaky at first. It felt really disconnected because we're following Katniss's perspective, and because Katniss is so mentally unstable at this point and she's doesn't have a drive to work towards anything, following her is not the funnest thing. Even though I really love the first half of this book, the flow of the plot wasn't very smooth. Once we get to the Capitol, the goal becomes a lot more clear and a lot more focused, and it really pulls you in at that point. However, while I enjoyed the first half of the plot, even though it was a little disconnected, and the second part of the plot was really driven, the second part had the biggest plot hole that Tony and I both found and really, really disliked.
Yeah. So in our breakdown of plots, we say that the plot has to directly relate to the characters. In this specific case, it was the other way around, where the characters related directly to the plot, which was basically we have to overthrow the Capitol. The characters related directly to the plot rather than the plot directly to the characters, but it worked because of the story that was being told, and I think for the most part those two are basically interchangeable, but I haven't thought about that enough yet to know for sure if that's something that I could say indefinitely.
Either way, though, Suzanne Collins got away with it, which I am constantly amazed with the type of things she gets away with in her writing. It's very impressive. So yeah, that plot hole was a big deterrent for us in plot, and we'll talk about that some more in a little bit.
So the themes in really all three of these books are kind of a little bit ambiguous in that while they're there and they're obvious, they're kind of, because you're looking through the perspective of Katniss, who I believe is 17 when we first meet her, or 16 or something like that.
16.
She's not a full-grown, mature adult, so she is looking at these, at the games and the world in such a skewed manner that that it makes the themes a little bit ambiguous, but they're also such powerful themes once you really latch onto them. This book had, the themes were like maintaining freedom, as well as the problems of having a revolution. Again, love is a huge theme. She is trying really hard in this one to not just love her family because they're her family, but also make a conscious effort to be there for them and do what needs to be done in order to keep them alive and safe. Also, another theme is the idea of how far are you allowed to go to fix something that's broken. And the answer that they kind of give, and this is actually from a trailer to a movie, but it's, I like the phrase and I feel like it fits really well, and that phrase is, until the cure is worse than the disease. So that idea of until what you're doing becomes worse than what's happening to you, as the answer to one of these questioned themes, these themes posed as a question.
So revenge is another driving force and theme, if you will, not necessarily a positive theme, but a theme in this book, and you see it mostly in Gale, but you do see it in Katniss as well, for sure.
But again, that is not a theme that they're promoting as, oh, revenge is good. They're promoting it, or they're looking at it through the lens of, this is what happens when you pursue revenge.
Right, but they're also showing it, it's kind of a weird balance because they are showing revenge in a more negative light, but it is part of the justice that they're showing. Justice must be done, and these people are trying to enact revenge, and it happens to align with justice, and I think that's where the moral gray kind of comes in. The line isn't super stark and visible anymore. So the world and setting, world/setting, is a lot more expansive in this book than in the other books because we have District 13 and we have the Capitol, which are both things we've only seen parts of and not these parts of. Yeah. District 13 we haven't even seen before. Yeah. So that was really fun. Just part of why I like the first third of the book is because of District 13. It was a very militaristic, organized type of world that was, and I enjoyed getting to know a little bit, even though it had a lot of flaws. And the Capitol, the level of the Capitol we saw without the people everywhere at once in the streets and how they lived, and am I getting into spoilers?
No, that's fine.
Was all super, super interesting. It's just, this is normal everyday life for these people. This is what their houses and homes look like.
Again, this phrase that we still haven't figured out a better one for, the special aesthetic, since there's not a magic system. It's not a whole lot different in this book, because again, it is a Hunger Games book. It's a dystopian sci-fi, like the last two have been. Where the difference comes in is they're not in a built arena in the same way as they were in book 1 and book 2. This time they're in District 13 in the capital, and District 8 for a little bit, but that's really only a couple of chapters, so it's not too much focused on. But seeing the way that the capital was built and laid out and designed and everything is very interesting, and is absolutely in my opinion, a good addition to this world. As for our general thoughts, for me, and I think for Kate as well, we both found this book a lot better than the first time we read it. The first time we read it, we kind of were just like shocked and annoyed, at least I was, and I didn't come out of it loving the book.
We didn't know how to process it. I feel like was a huge part of it.
But this time around, I was looking for inconsistencies or things that didn't quite make sense or sit well with me, and I feel like there was another minor one that I can't remember, but there was one, like we already mentioned, one that really stood out and really annoyed me, and we'll get more to that in a little bit.
As far as my general thoughts, I really loved part 1, and part 2 had so much potential, and I started to love it, but that plot hole was there that really threw me off. It didn't sit well, and it didn't quite make sense. So, jumping over to writing style, once again, we've talked about this before in our vlogs especially, Suzanne Collins' writing style is so appealing, and I love reading hers because it's engaging and appealing, and I'm using the same words over and over again.
It's accessible.
Right, and it's easy, if you will, and it's first person, which Tony says even he's gotten used to her style of first person. And he doesn't typically like that.
I actually didn't mind it. I don't think I had any issues with the first person viewpoint in this specific book. I know I had a couple with book 1 and a few with book 2.
And I'm also really surprised, as a aspiring writer myself, little things that I've learned that, there's not rules in writing, but there are kind of like unofficial rules or guidelines that she doesn't have to follow, and she gets away with them so well. And it's inspiring to know that she can figure it out and make it. She can do it well.
All right, so we are going to do a quick spoiler. I don't know how quick it'll be. We're going to do a little spoiler review section. Less of a review, but we're going to talk about that one specific point that we really didn't like and didn't sit well with us. Here's the timestamp if you want to skip it, but if you want to watch it, we'll jump right in. So go ahead. Go ahead.
In part 2, as they're traveling through the underground of the capital, the mutts start to chase them, and they start running from the mutts. Initially, that's their initial plan, is to run from the mutts. And they get to this point where Katniss realizes, we have to get out of underground. This is not the place to be. And she asks Pollux to show them the way out, and he shows them. And so they're on this ledge. There is a stream of pollution and waste and chemical waste between them. They're on a 10-foot ledge, and the mutts are coming, and all they have to do is climb up the ladder through the manhole, essentially, to get out. And that's all they have to do to get out from underground. And what happens is the mutts start coming, and they stop and they attack instead of going up the ladder.
The reason why this made us so angry is because they ended up killing Finnick in this section, which killing Finnick I actually don't have an issue with. I feel like that's a good way to drive the stakes home. But the way they did it, or the way Suzanne Collins did it in this one, just didn't sit well with us, because the goal at that point in time was to get up the ladder and get out.
Right.
And yet they didn't. They ran to the bottom of the ladder and they're like, okay, let's turn around and start shooting at the mutts. And so they turned around and started shooting at the mutts. The mutts kept coming, the mutts kept coming. There was plenty of time for all of them to get up the ladder, and then they didn't. And it ended up with Finnick, who is a fan favorite of basically everyone's, and then a bunch of other characters end up dying at this point.
The other thing that's really frustrating, as at one point they realize they're not going to be able to beat the mutts, and so Katniss gets up the ladder, and a couple of the other people get up the ladder, and then they're like, oh wait, where's Finnick and this person and Holmes, and I don't remember who the last person was who died down there. And
Kester.
it's like an afterthought almost, But the thing that's frustrating is it wasn't a heroic sacrifice, and I feel like that's what we needed to see with Finnick, was either it was the sacrifice of a soldier, casualties of war are a thing, or a heroic hero sacrifice. And we didn't see that, they just died. And that wasn't effective to us, and we were angry because we felt like there was ways out of it.
I mean, I don't think we're going to do it tonight, but when we started talking about this, we went through and found that section, and we're like, okay, did we just read it wrong and there really wasn't time for them to get through it, or was there time for them to get through it and Suzanne Collins purposely padded it so that Finnick would die? And what we found is that there was no reason for them to die in that way. They all would have had plenty of time to get up the ladder. I mean, maybe not. I guess we don't truly know how long it took the Mutts to cross the river of toxic waste.
And climb a 10-foot ledge.
Yeah. Well, jump down it first, climb across, and climb it again. So it just didn't make sense to us why all the characters would end up dying here when they shouldn't have, when we felt that there was enough time, and we purposely looked to make sure. So
there's one disclaimer here, and that is all of these characters that were showed here, in a fight or flight situation, they would fight over fly. And that's shown here, I think. But I don't think it's realistic because these are also logical characters, and they saw the need to get out. And I don't know, it doesn't work.
It doesn't sit well with us.
Yeah.
Maybe if we were to talk to the author and she could explain why she chose to do that.
Right.
And explain, no, there actually wasn't enough time. Maybe if there was some explanation, then we could understand and we'd be better with it. But because of that one thing, it just didn't quite make sense, right?
And it was so significant because it's Finnick and it's Holmes and Castor. And these were all characters who are really important to the story and really important to the characters. And there's just so much with them. To see them die almost in vain is really difficult.
Yeah.
So, to wrap this up, this is the end of the spoiler section for you all, and our end review, I have 4.25 stars, so 4.25 stars for this, which is highly specific, but I did the math and it works.
Yeah, I'd give it a 4 stars. We both really enjoyed it a lot more than we thought we would, and most people think this is the weakest of all 3, and I'm not sure that I disagree with that. But I also don't think it's as bad as everybody makes it out to be.
Like Tony said before, I love this book, and it's probably my favorite of the trilogies, having read it a second time. But that plot hole did throw me off.
Yeah. If it wasn't for that one thing, I think it would easily be our favorite.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, thanks for watching, guys. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please comment down below. Tell us what your thoughts on this book are, and give it a like and subscribe if you haven't. We will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Stay warm.